Jerusalem, 1948. Hadassah Hospital. Dr. Ahmed Tibi, an Arab physician, watches a wounded Jewish Haganah fighter being wheeled into his emergency room, blood soaking through makeshift bandages. Outside, gunfire echoes through the streets as Arab and Jewish forces battle for control of neighborhoods mere blocks away. The wounded man's comrades just killed Dr. Tibi's cousin in yesterday's fighting. By every logic of war, revenge, and communal loyalty, this doctor should refuse treatment, should let this enemy fighter die. But Dr. Tibi is reaching for his surgical instruments. Across the operating theater, Jewish nurse Rachel Levy is preparing anesthesia for an Arab patient whose community attacked her family's neighborhood this morning. Neither speaks about the contradiction. Neither acknowledges the impossibility of what they're doing. They read medical professionals in a hospital that has somehow remained a neutral sanctuary while the city outside tears itself apart in sectarian violence. In 12 hours, Dr. Tibi will treat 15 Jewish casualties. Nurse Levy will save 8 Arab lives. And tomorrow, they'll do it again, maintaining a professional collaboration that defies everything happening beyond these walls. This is the story no one wanted to tell about the people who refused to become enemies, even when war demanded it. The full story. When Hippocratic Oaths proved stronger than communal hatred, the violence consuming Jerusalem in late 1947 and early 1948 followed the United Nations partition vote that would divide Palestine into separate Jewish and Arab states. A decision that transformed political disagreement into armed conflict as both communities fought to control territory the partition plan awarded to them or contested. The fighting was brutal, and intimate neighbors who'd coexisted uneasily for years suddenly became enemies. Streets that had been mixed Arab and Jewish neighborhoods turned into battle zones. And the veneer of civil society collapsed into communal warfare, where identity determined whether you were predator or prey. The conventional narrative of this period emphasizes the violence, the mutual atrocities, the rapid descent into total war between communities that British Mandate authorities could no longer control. But within this context of disintegrating coexistence, scattered institutions, and individuals maintained relationships, and professional cooperation that defied the dominant pattern of escalating hatred. And hospitals became the most significant spaces where that impossible coexistence persisted. Hadassah Hospital in Jerusalem represented one of the most striking examples of this phenomenon, a major medical facility where Arab and Jewish medical staff continued working together even as their respective communities were killing each other in the streets surrounding the hospital. The professional relationships that had developed during peacetime, when medical training and hospital work created communities of practice that transcended ethnic and religious identities, didn't automatically collapse when political conflict erupted into violence. Arab physicians who'd trained alongside Jewish colleagues who'd collaborated on difficult cases, who'd developed mutual professional respect, found themselves in the surreal position of treating wounded fighters from the Jewish community while knowing that those same fighters had been shooting at Arab forces. Jewish nurses who de-worked with Arab orderlies and technicians faced the cognitive dissonance of providing care to Arab casualties whose comrades had just attacked Jewish neighborhoods, perhaps killing people the nurses knew personally. The ethical framework that sustained this impossible collaboration was medical professionalism, the Hippocratic tradition that physicians treat the sick and wounded regardless of who they are. The nursing ethics that prioritize patient welfare over personal feelings, and the institutional culture of hospitals as healing spaces separate from the violence outside. These were abstract principles but deeply internalized professional identities that medical personnel had developed through years of training and practice. When an Arab doctor looked at a wounded Jewish fighter, his medical training saw a patient with specific injuries requiring specific interventions, even as his personal identity might see an enemy whose comrades had killed Arabs. The professional identity didn't erase the personal one, but it created a framework for action that allowed treatment to proceed despite the emotional and political conflicts the situation created. Similarly, Jewish medical staff treating Arab casualties were operating within professional protocols that made the patient's medical needs the primary consideration, creating a moral space where humanitarian care could occur despite the broader context of communal warfare. The practical realities of maintaining this professional collaboration were extraordinarily difficult and required constant navigation of contradictions that had no good resolution. Medical staff arriving at work had to pass through areas of active fighting, with Arab staff sometimes risking attack from Jewish forces to reach the hospital and Jewish staff facing similar dangers from Arab fighters. Once inside the hospital, they worked in an environment where casualties from both sides arrived continuously, where the operating theaters and emergency rooms became spaces where yesterday's shooters and today's wounded existed in the same physical space, separated only by medical need and professional ethics. The hospital became a kind of neutral zone, though. Neutral was always a fragile and contested status. Armed fighters from both communities sometimes tried to enter the hospital to attack enemy wounded, requiring hospital security and medical staff to physically block them and insist on the hospital's protected status. The protection of medical facilities was theoretically ensured by international humanitarian law. But in the chaotic violence of 1948 Jerusalem, law meant little without individuals willing to enforce it through personal courage. The emotional toll on medical staff maintaining this collaboration was immense and largely unacknowledged in contemporary accounts. Arab doctors treating Jewish fighters knew those same fighters might return to combat and kill more Arabs, potentially including the doctor's own family or community members. The act of healing someone who would likely return to fighting against your community created moral complications that medical ethics did unfully address. The Hippocratic tradition says heal the sick, but what about healing someone who will use their recovered health to harm your people? Jewish nurses caring for wounded Arab fighters faced identical moral paradox, providing skilled medical care that would restore someone to health so they could return to attacking Jewish communities. Some medical staff resolved these contradictions by focusing entirely on the immediate medical situation, compartmentalizing the broader implications and treating each patient as an individual case rather than a representative of an enemy community. Others struggled with guilt, feeling they were betraying their communities by helping the enemy, while simultaneously recognizing that abandoning medical ethics would make them complicit in the dehumanization that war demands. The hospital collaborations revealed that even in contexts of intense communal conflict, professional identities and humanitarian ethics could create spaces of cooperation that defied the dominant patterns of violence. This wasn't universal. Some medical staff did abandon their professional ethics. Some hospitals became contested territories rather than protected spaces, and some individuals found the contradictions impossible to sustain. But the very existence of hospitals, where Arab and Jewish medical personnel continued working together, treating casualties from both communities with equal professional care, proved that the descent into total enmity wasn't inevitable or complete. The narratives of the 1948 period tend to emphasize the violence, the mutual atrocities, the breakdown of coexistence into warfare, because those dramatic events shaped the political and territorial outcomes. But the quieter story of medical staff maintaining professional cooperation and humanitarian care challenges the narrative of total communal breakdown and suggests that even in the worst violence, some people made different choices. The institutional and individual courage required to maintain these hospital collaborations was substantial and often unrecognized. Hospital administrators had to negotiate with armed forces from both communities to maintain the facility's protected status, sometimes literally standing in doorways to prevent fighters from entering to attack enemy wounded. Medical staff had to make daily decisions to continue working in environments where they were vulnerable to attack, where their professional activities might be viewed as treason by their own communities, and where the emotional strain of treating enemies while friends and family died in the fighting created psychological burdens that had no good resolution. The maintenance of professional medical cooperation required active choice every day in contexts where abandoning that cooperation would have been understandable, and where peer pressure from their respective communities often pushed toward viewing the enemy as undeserving of humanitarian care. The legacy of these hospital collaborations during the 1947-1948 violence is complicated and contested. In some narratives, they're held up as examples of the humanity that persisted despite the conflict. Proof that Arabs and Jews could cooperate even in the worst circumstances, and models for the kind of professional and humanitarian relationships that should be preserved and expanded. In other narratives, they're largely forgotten or minimized, treated as exceptions that don't meaningfully challenge the dominant story of communal conflict and incompatible national movements. The medical staff who maintained these collaborations rarely became heroes in their own communities. Their willingness to treat enemy wounded was often viewed with suspicion or hostility rather than celebrated, and many faced criticism for prioritizing professional ethics over communal loyalty. The courage of maintaining humanitarian principles in wartime is often less recognized than the courage of fighting, creating a historical record that emphasizes combatants and downplays those who insisted on treating all casualties as human beings deserving care. The broader lesson from the hospital collaborations in 1948, Jerusalem, is that even in the most intense communal conflicts, the collapse into total enmity is never complete. That professional identities and humanitarian ethics can create spaces where cooperation persists despite overwhelming pressure toward division. And that individual moral choices matter even in contexts where structural forces seem to determine everything. The Arab doctors and Jewish nurses who treated each other as wounded were ending the conflict through their medical care weren't resolving the political disagreements that had erupted into violence and weren't preventing the larger catastrophe unfolding outside the hospital walls. But they were maintaining a form of human connection and professional cooperation that refused to accept that war required abandoning all ethical constraints and viewing the enemy as undeserving of basic humanitarian consideration. Their collaboration proved that choices existed even in terrible circumstances, that professional ethics could withstand extraordinary pressure, and that not everyone accepted the logic of total war and mutual dehumanization that the conflict seemed to demand.